Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Hutter. I am the chair of the Historical Resources Board. We are getting started today at 1:06 p.m. Welcome, everyone. This is our first meeting back together in more than 2 years. So it's nice to see everyone's faces in person, and we will still have participation from the public via Zoom. So bear with us here as we get started. So I'll turn it over to Suzanne Seeger.
Thank you, Chair Hutter. Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Seeger, a senior planner in the Historical Resources section of Development Services. Today's Historical Resources Board meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of California Government Code Section 54953E, as amended by Assembly Bill 361, which allows the city to use teleconferencing and to provide the public an opportunity to address the Historical Resources Board via call-in option or an internet-based service option during a proclaimed state of emergency. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube today. Additionally, we are continuing to provide alternatives to in-person attendance for participating in a Historical Resources Board meeting. In lieu of in-person attendance, members of the public may submit their comments online via the Development Services webpage. Today, we are using Zoom as our hybrid meeting platform. Please note the buttons on your Zoom meeting board that pop up when you move the mouse. Share screen will enable an applicant to give a presentation, and the microphone is to mute and unmute. Please remember to stay muted when you are not talking, and to unmute yourself when you speak. When wanting to participate in a discussion, please virtually raise your hand and Chair Hutter will call on you in the order entered. Please refrain from using the meeting chat in order to comply with the Brown Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. So we're going to do a quick roll call to confirm board member attendance. We have everybody in the room, but when I call your name, please unmute yourself and say present. Second Vice Chair Taylor.
Here.
Dr. Chang.
Here.
Ms. Coyle.
Present.
Ms. Farley. Mr. McCullough.
Present.
Mr. Winter.
Present.
And Dr. Woods.
Unmute.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. We have a couple of potentially early departures. Board member McCullough needs to leave at 3 o'clock. Board member Farley needs to leave at 3:30. So we'll do what we can to get through the meeting and hopefully conclude all of our business today. Let's move on to approval of the minutes for August 25th, 2022. I did not see any speaker slips on this item, Ms. Seeger. Okay. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on consideration of the minutes? No one here in person, anyone online? All right, seeing none. Any board member comment, consideration, motions?
I'm going to abstain, Chair Hutter, because I was not present at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. I don't think that's required, but I always appreciate it. Anyone else?
Minutes, sorry. Yeah.
Motion from Mr. Winter. We have a second. A second from Mr. McCullough. Any comment on the minutes? All right. I believe we're still going to do a roll call vote for clarity. So starting with board member Coyle.
I abstain.
Dr. Chang.
Yes.
Board member Farley. Board member Taylor.
Yay.
Board member Winter.
Yes.
Dr. Woods.
Yay.
Board member McCullough.
Yes.
And that's a yes for me. So we've got 701. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right, next up, we're going to have non-agenda public comment. These are issues within the jurisdiction of the Historical Resources Board not previously heard or on the agenda.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks.
All set to go.
Yes, sorry.
right, no
we
problem.
thought we had a
Okay, I did not see any speaker slips for non-agenda public comment. Does anyone from the public who's present today or online wish to speak?
Yes, I believe there's someone online.
Hello?
Okay. Sorry, Charles, I could not see your hand, your virtual hand, but you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Hybrid meetings are a challenge. I know that for sure. Just 2 points. I did.
Chuck, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. Just give us 1 second. We're trying to figure that out.
Charles, try again.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Which one needs to be unmuted? This one? Give us just a sec.
Caroline, the both speaker needs to be enabled. You need to push the.
Charles, are you unmuted on your end? 'Cause we're
I
good on
should
this
be.
side.
I should be unmuted.
Yeah, looks like he's speaking. We can't hear him.
Okay.
I can hear him, but we can't hear. We can't hear him. I wonder why that is. Is this still connected? Yes. Oh, it's on. This is on. Yeah. Okay. All right, this is on. Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We're not able to hear him.
Charles, we're working on it. Give us just a minute.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Charles.
Charles, try one more time.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yay, very good. Hybrid. It's it's a challenge, I know. Thank you so much. I won't take that much time, just 2 points. One is, I guess there was some confusion on the policy subcommittee meeting that was going to be held. I think it was canceled because of the Brown Act, and I just hope that when the policy subcommittee agenda is put out again, whether it will inform the public about whether it will be just in person or another hybrid meeting. I think that's an important aspect. The second point really quickly is the city is about to embark on 2 major city development projects, one in the Midway and one in the Civic Core. And I am curious, since they are, as I understand it, at least in the Civic Core, city-owned property, and I believe the sports arena one is also, will the city perform its 45-year review of the structures that are on those sites as part of the normal city process for buildings that are 45 years old? Or how will that process work since the city's engaging with developers? I don't know if you'll have an answer today, but if you do, that's great. Otherwise, I'd love to hear the answer at a staff report at another meeting. And I ask that because the Civic Theater may have some master architects associated with its design. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Charles. I will give an opportunity for staff if we have any instant response or thoughts, comments on that. And if not, maybe we can bring that back for future comment at a future meeting. But Suzanne, do you want to start?
Staff's not prepared to discuss those items at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Charles, for raising that. And I think we will get a brief update on the policy subcommittee here coming up on the committee report. Do we have any other speakers for non-agenda public comment? All right, hearing none, we will move on to administrative items, board administrative matters and general information. Ms. Seeger.
Thank you. For today's meeting, the board members were emailed the HRB criteria guidelines, the motions and findings form for historical designation, and correspondence for items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 from Save Our Heritage Organization.
Great, thank you.
Chairperson Hutter, I'd like to make an announcement really quick. It's just procedural. Because we're being recorded at this point in time and the video will be posted later, I'd just like to confirm and let the public know that to join by telephone, you dial 1-669-254-5252, or you can call toll free at 1-833-568-8864.
Can you give those numbers once more?
Sure. Again, to join by telephone, you dial 1-669-254-5252, or you could call toll free at 1-833-568-8864. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I would just make a request of staff, and Ms. Seeger, we can talk about it, but I think we have been using virtual blue folders and getting all that information to our email on the morning of the meetings. I myself did not print those out today because I thought perhaps we would have non-virtual blue folders today. So if I could make that request for next time, I know it's a little bit more paper, but it's always good when we have correspondence before the meeting to be able to quickly refer to that. And I know we'll all have our computers up in front, but the less that we have to touch things on our computer, the more likely we are to avoid tech issues and messing up our Zooms. So we'll try and do that. If you could, thank you. All right, now on to general board member comments other than mine. Do we have any board members who wish to speak on items not on the agenda? Ms. Quill.
Yeah, I'd like to give this a try. Thank you, Mr. Hutter. I'd like to apologize for my uncharacteristic recent absences and take a moment to dedicate my participation in today's meeting to my dad, John A. Coyle, who recently passed on the East Coast. An intuitive person asked me this week if I got my start in historic preservation from my dad, and I guess I did. Among his many accomplishments, he founded still active historical societies in New Jersey and Florida. He helped found maritime museums in New Jersey. He restored historic homes in both New Jersey and Florida. He loved to restore and sail historic wooden sailboats on the bays near Useppa Island and Long Beach Island. And he was an expert model builder with many given to friends and museums. I think he did all that to preserve memory, stories, and experiences, but also fundamentally to promote community. His motto was, if you want to do anything well, you got to do it with other people. These are values I've tried to aspire to on this board, and he will be missed by many. Thank you.
We're very sorry for your loss, Courtney.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments on non-agenda items? All right, let's move on to conflict of interest declarations. Anyone have a disclosure to make on conflicts of interest? Okay, how about ex parte communications? Hearing none. How about failure to visit designation sites or invocation of waiver? All right, nothing on any of those three. I believe we can move on then to staff reports, and we'll start with the historical resources section, ESD. I don't think I've seen Mr. Avalos in the room, but
No, but I am a better replacement. Elizabeth
Terrific.
Sherwin, program manager.
thank you.
Last month, we introduced one junior planner and some of the board members weren't here. So I'd like to reintroduce Andrew Wood. He is our new junior planner that started several weeks ago. Andrew has a bachelor's degree in anthropology focusing on bioarchaeology from San Francisco State University. And currently Andrew is working on his master's of city planning at San Diego State. So please welcome him. Thank you. We also just recently hired Megan Walker, who is a new associate planner. And she has her master's degree in urban studies from the University of Nebraska and her undergraduate degree from Virginia Commonwealth University. So again, welcome. And then lastly, we have also have another new person. Her name is Amanda Wing. She is our new management intern in the historical resources section. Amanda is a senior at SDSU, majoring in interdisciplinary studies in 3 departments: history, English, and American Indian Studies. Amanda is also pursuing a minor in art history. So again, thank you and welcome everyone.
Terrific. Welcome to all of our new staff members. Historic Preservation Planning Section and Planning Department. I don't see Kelly, but what's that?
Yes,
And
thank
Bernie's
you.
on to speak. Bernie, go ahead.
Yes, I am. Chair Hutter, thank you. And members of the board, just a brief update since we presented the historical resources items associated with the Mira Mesa Community Plan Update at your August meeting. The Plan Updates Program Environmental Impact Report is currently out for public review, and comments are due October 21st. And of course, we look forward to bringing the CPU to the board at your October meeting for a recommendation to the City Council on adoption. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Bernie. All right, we're on to subcommittee report out. Suzanne.
Thank you. Staff apologizes for the abrupt cancellation of this month's policy subcommittee meeting, but we will be moving all of those items to the October meeting because we believe they're very important to discuss. And that meeting will be held on October 10th, 3 p.m. And we will be sending out further information regarding location and whether the meeting will be hybrid or not. So stay tuned. And then for the Archaeological and Tribal Cultural Resources Subcommittee, please visit the Development Services website for more information.
Thank you very much. On design assistance, Shannon Anthony.
So the next meeting of the Design Assistance Subcommittee meeting will be scheduled on Wednesday, October 5th.
Very good. Thank you. We're on to requests for continuances or withdrawals. I understand that the applicant for item 5 is requesting a continuance. Is there anyone from the public that wants to speak on the request for continuance? Mr. Wallace is available, but do you have anything to add?
I think he has to.
What's that?
I think he has to actually.
Okay. Mr. Wallace, I'm told as a point of order, if you could come up and make the request. I have your slip here, but.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to request a 30-day continuance for Canterbury today. We were fortunate enough to have an old owner stop by the owner's house and have some historic photos. So we sent those over to staff, but they haven't had a chance to review them and evaluate them. And I haven't had a chance to do a staff report, but we'd like to do that. So hopefully this is the last time that this one gets continued and you can see it definitely in 30 days and go over it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Staff, is that 30-day window enough time for you guys to work through the information that's been provided?
Yes. Yeah, we can accommodate 30 days.
Okay, thank you. I know I'll just say for the record, I think that item was previously continued from our July meeting. But so far as I know, there is no bar on an owner requesting a continuance on a matter that an owner is bringing forward. So I think we are within our rights and bylaws. Do we have a motion or any board member comment?
Motion to continue.
All right, motion for Mr. Winter for the 30 days.
To the, yes, for the October regular board meeting. And I'll second that as amended.
Very good. Teamwork between Mr. Winter and Ms. Coyle. Motion and second for a 30-day continuance to our October board meeting. Any comment from the board? Hearing none, we will take a vote. Start with Board Member Coyle.
Aye.
Dr. Chang.
Aye.
Board Member Farley.
Aye.
Board Member Taylor.
Aye.
Board Member Winter.
Aye.
Dr. Woods.
Aye.
Board Member McCullough.
Yes.
And that's a yes from me. So the motion carries unanimously. All right, we had received a slip for item 5. Do we have any other requests for continuance or withdrawals from the public or other matters before we move on? All right, hearing none, we will move on to requests for items to be placed on the consent agenda. We can entertain a motion by any board member to approve any agenda item as a consent item when no speaker slips have been submitted in favor or in opposition to the item. Items approved on consent are approved in accordance with the staff recommendation as reflected on the agenda and described in the staff report to the HRB. The following items are non-controversial with all parties agreeable to the staff recommendation, and the board may wish to approve them on consent. Items do require an affirmative vote of 6 board members to designate even on consent. So first we have item 1, Arklow Cottage, located at 7425 Fay Avenue. We did receive 2 speaker slips on item 1. Both appear to be in favor. One from Elizabeth Austin and the other from Lee Plesniak. Mr. Wallace, is it fair to say that those speakers do not need to be heard if the item's on consent? Okay. All right, item number 2 on consent, we have Joseph and Elizabeth Yamada House located at 1676 El Camino del Teatro, which is do not have any speaker slips. Item number 3, El Cantoral Court, located at 2454-2474 Adams Avenue. We did receive 2 speaker slips on that item, both identifying that Mr. May, that would be your time, but you're okay if on consent as well. Okay, and then I'll also note for the record on item 3, we did receive a web comment from Kristen Harms stating that the University Heights Historical Society supports staff recommendation to designate this item. Item number 4, I'm going to butcher this, but I'll go with it. The Mutkula Zuli Mut La Jolla site, number 11, located within the La Jolla community. Item 4, also eligible for approval on consent. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on the items that have just been identified for the consent agenda? Do we have anyone online? All right, then we'll go to board member comment. Dr. Woods?
I support both of these items, but I would still like a brief discussion of several aspects for item number 2, the Yamada House, and item number 3, the El Cantoral Court.
Okay, so we will pull items 2 and 3 from consent. Any other comments, questions from the board? All right, do we have a motion then as to remaining items? Mr. Winter, you've been my guy so far.
Can I do I have to move the consent agenda or the whole agenda minus those 2 items?
I think you are making a motion to put certain items on
Okay.
consent. So you might want to identify those items.
Can I make a motion to put items 1 and 4 on consent?
We have a second?
My second.
All right. Got a second from Dr. Chang, and I think Board Member Farley just behind. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second as to items 1 and 4 on consent. Any further discussion before we vote? Ms. Coyle?
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to see 3 La Jolla properties on the agenda for today, and with item number 1, the Arklow Cottage, to see a named cottage in La Jolla move forward. I'm very appreciative to the property owners for moving that forward. It's a resource that's becoming more and more scarce, so I was very pleased. So I thank them. On item number 4, of course, the Spindrift site should be listed for its archaeological and tribal cultural resource values. I just still have a concern about bifurcating an evaluation of the structures from an evaluation of the site. And also want to ensure that the AB 52 letters that do go out do mention when there are ancestral human remains that have been located on the property, as that information is very important to our local tribal communities and will elevate in priority their look and review of a site. So thank you. With those comments, I do support the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. I know that we have several board members who have been on the board for a few years now. But for some of our new folks, this may be the first time that we are doing a designation of the land and separating out the structure. So can I ask, put staff on the spot a little bit just to explain that process or kind of how that works? If I may, just in brief, without pulling it from but from as a procedural explanation of how that works.
Clarify, you mean how we're regulating this?
Sure.
So historical resources, when we regulate an archaeological property, we would we would evaluate the project in relation to the we would kick it to our staff archaeologists, to be honest with you, to make sure that the archaeological site is still intact. There is nothing above ground, so there would be no review of what goes on top of the Archae site per se. It's just how it impacts the significance and the integrity of the Archae site. Is that good?
And then wouldn't it come back if there were structures put on there, a site development permit would be necessary? No. Okay.
Thank you. That's helpful. And we just lost our screen. I don't know what that means, but let's pause for just a minute.
Ancestors. They didn't like my answer. That's all I'll say.
I think the computer that is displaying our screen probably just went to sleep. So we're going to give that a minute to
Maybe
come back online.
This one's good.
That one is on. No.
Okay, while we work through that tech issue, I think, do we have any further board member comment? Questions? Then I think we have a motion in a second as to items 1 and 4 on consent. So I will go ahead and call the roll for a vote. Board Member Coyle?
aye.
Dr. Chang?
Aye.
Board Member Farley?
Aye.
Board Member Taylor?
Aye.
Board Member Winter?
Aye.
Dr. Woods?
Aye.
Board Member McCullough?
Yes.
And that's a yes from me. So the motion carries 8-0. We do have a remaining on the agenda. We have items 2, 3, and 6. I believe we need to have a motion to approve an order for consideration of those items. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll move that we keep it in the same order. 2, 4, was it 2, 3, and then 6?
Okay. I don't think it does. Do we have a second on the, I'll second the motion to keep us moving forward. Any questions, comments on the ordering motion? All right, hearing none, we will go to a roll call. Ms. Coyle,
Aye.
Dr. Chang,
Aye.
Board Member Farley, Board Member Taylor,
Aye.
Board Member Winter,
Aye.
Dr. Woods,
Aye.
Board Member McCullough,
Yes.
and that's a yes for me. So we will continue on with the agenda in order, numerical order, items 2, 3, and 6. So if the folks relating to item 2 can get ready here, we'll jump right into it. Is that you, Mr. Lin?
Item number 2. Hello, everyone. For item number 2, we have a presentation prepared, and I'll get that started right now. Okay. Hello, everyone. Board members, staff, members of the public, applicants, and homeowners. This is item. My name is Alvin Lin. I'm assistant planner here at San Diego DSD, and this is item 2. The property located at 1676 El Camino del Teatro is being brought before the HRB in conjunction with a preliminary review application to determine whether or not the property is significant as part of a constraint analysis for future development. Historical resource research report was prepared, which concludes that the resource is significant under HRB Criterion B and Criterion C, and staff concurs. Here's some of the property information. We're in La Jolla Council District 1. The subject resource is a single family residence located in the La Jolla community and consists of a 1973 one-story residence with an attached garage constructed in the shed style. The exterior of the one-story house is clad in wood horizontal siding. The shed roof features composite shingles and has no eave overhang. The entry includes a floor-to-ceiling glass skylights and a trellis. Landscape leading up to the entry consists of textured concrete steps and a natural boulder walkway. The side elevations feature wooden decks and an inset courtyard. The shed roof form is most visible from these side elevations. The inside courtyard features wooden doors, glass sliding doors, and a fixed encasement style windows. Several modifications have been made to the house since the date of construction, including a side elevation in-kind deck replacement, a roof replacement, and a 2014 putting green in the rear yard, seen here. Staff is not recommending designation under Criterion A. For Criterion B, we have Joseph Yamada, who's the original resident of the property up until 2020. He is a prominent landscape architect who designed landscapes for SeaWorld, Scripps Institute, Seaport Village, the Del Mar Grandstand, UCSD for about 20 years, as well as other establishments between the 1960s and 1990s. He influenced local land development and landscape architecture also during this time. He's a fellow of the American Society of the Landscape Architects, as well as has also been awarded by the AIA. Elizabeth Yamada also lived at the subject property from 1973 until 2020. She also worked in the Wimmer and Yamada landscape architectural firm from 1976 to 1995. She has led activism and educational efforts in the Japanese American Citizens League and the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation in the 2010s, as well as guided and directed exhibits and educational contents for the Japanese American National Museum during the 2010s. She has awards from the Charter 100, the Salvation Army Auxiliary, the Girl Scouts, and who recognized her contributions to the community and her philanthropic work. Criterion C, the resource features, continues to convey the historical significance of the shed style by embodying the characteristics associated with the style. Therefore, staff recommends designation under Criterion C. Staff is not recommending Criterion D designation, and that concludes staff report. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I believe that we do have, well, I'll ask, we have a staff report, or sorry, a historical research report from IS Architecture. Is there anyone here from IS Architecture who wishes to speak? Yes, looks like Kelsey Kaline online.
Yeah, hi everybody. I can start a video. We have a presentation, but it's, since staff agrees with us, it honestly is quite similar to Alvin's. Dr. Woods, is there anything specifically I can answer for you?
I have two questions. The one, I just find it ironic that we're designating the home of a landscape architect and there are no landscape components included in the designation. And I know you said in the report that they didn't find a formal design, but he was living in that house until what, 2 years ago? And I actually wanted to throw this to our landscape architects or and to you. I mean, aren't there elements there that perhaps should be included?
Yeah, we identified things like the natural boulder walkway and I believe the waterfall next to the front door. And as a designated site, you know, large changes would be reviewed by staff. So we completely agree that the landscape itself is significant, but you know, landscapes are living and evolving, and it's kind of those built features that we identified specifically. The relationship with the courtyards to the spaces, the koi pond, like I said, the natural boulders, etc.
But should those be called out in the resolution then? Should they be included?
We are amenable to that.
Yeah, we're happy to include that in the resolution, to include stuff like the natural boulder walkway, the koi pond. There's also a bench on the side deck, as well as the waterfall in the front.
Mr. Hutter, can I interject?
Yeah, what I want to do is, I appreciate that Ms. Kaline did raise a question directly to Dr. Woods. We kind of have a unique situation here because of the way that this item was pulled and trying to address specific board member comments. I do want to give the public a chance to speak to the extent that there are any other members of the public that want to engage in this discussion or participate. We welcome that opportunity before we get into a full-blown board discussion. Looks like Mr. Kaminsky has raised his hand.
Let's try it again. Can you hear me?
We can.
I am surprised that the Yamadas, at least Joe Yamada, has not been declared a master landscape architect. And I think that's an important consideration as part of this discussion. I'm not that familiar with Elizabeth Yamada's work, but I know Joe, because of the patriarchal notion of our country, he probably got more of the prominence, but I know that Elizabeth had work in the office. And I think that his consideration as a master landscape architect is really important for HRB consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? All right, then we will close public comment on the item. Ms. Kaline, please don't go far. We may come back to you, but we will turn now to board member comment, and I'd like to start with Mr. McCullough.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I agree with Alvin. You made the comment that it's difficult. I like, or somebody made the comment that landscapes are evolving, and so it's difficult, for designation. I'm wondering if there's precedence, though, especially in this case, to do mention rather of objects of the style, because I think the style is sort of very characteristic of the house and the garden. So maybe it's more, and I don't know, maybe this is a question for staff, could it be more of a mention of the style than individual objects?
Chair McCall, you might want to mute. So from a regulatory standpoint, the best thing that staff would like from the board is if you call out specific pieces of the landscape. Because once you get into things that are more abstract, it's really hard to regulate. Also, in the past, I believe we've designated certain trees or plants, certain particular items, which we've called out kind of on a map and attached to the resolution. So that's the way we've handled it in the past. And I believe we also like to get consent from the owner because it's really hard to regulate things that are growing and living.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I said that is, I mean, there's certain things, like I think I remember seeing like a bonsai black pine, right? And I mean, you say the black pine, but it's black. There's nothing really special about a black pine other than the fact that this, it was sort of bonsai'd. And that speaks to a style. So I don't know, maybe you could do it and some a little more specifics. I don't know, but anyways, that was my thoughts.
Thank you. Dr. Chang?
I know both Joe and Liz very, very well. So as I'm speaking, I'm actually very emotional. The two of them lovebirds passed away within a week of each other during COVID. I've been to this house many times. So as we're speaking about this, the black pine is a very special pine, very special significance culturally within the Japanese culture. They both met at the internment camp because of the Second World War. So the memories of their Japanese American history is actually present in this property. So I just want to say to Joe and Liz, we're happy that we're discussing this major house and landscape in particular. Joe has been so instrumental in not only many of the landscapes in San Diego, but elsewhere. We need to recognize his contribution in more ways than one. Liz Yamada had been such a pillar to this community. Her selfless services to the entire San Diego community must be understood in the context of a human being. And so I just want to say that I'm emotional, but I am in support of whatever designation and whatever recognition we can make. Thank you for the opportunity for me to express my emotions.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. Other board member comments, thoughts? Ms. Quayle.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chang, for sharing that. It's very important information and testimony. So I fully support the designation of this property. I want to ensure that we're doing right by it, and I'm concerned that if we do something on the fly relative to the landscaping, that it might not be correct and we might miss something. So I don't know where my other board members are feeling, but I think this property is going to be designated. The question is, what about the landscaping? And I don't want it to be on my watch that we miss something as important as that oak and other things that might be there that I'm not educated on. So I'd be comfortable sending this back for more information on the significant landscaping elements. And I could make a motion to that extent, but I would like to hear what the other board members' thoughts are on that. I just hate to do this on the fly and be making lesser informed guesses.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. Ms. Farley?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you got this is, to actually agree with Coyle, to just not on the fly. I was glad when Liz brought it up because I kind of had a little thing sitting there, and it's that timing is really important because it's that precedent. And so that history, Dr. Chen, is really, really key. I'm glad that you mentioned that because it starts the wheels turning and how we can get to that place. When McCullough talked about the style and, you know, just bringing that piece together. So I agree that it's just a matter of how. I don't necessarily say when it will happen. It's definitely deserving just figuring out how to put it so we don't set a precedent that may not be so, you know, it might open some other doors.
I would just offer there's a discussion of the landscape in the report from the consultant that starts on page 4 of 131 and goes on to page 6. Right in the middle there of page 5, there's actually Joseph Yamada's words describing the landscape and kind of, you know, what they did, which is, I think, pretty powerful in terms of the description of, you know, mention specific of the black pine, mentioning the New Zealand Christmas tree. So, you know, I would support Ms. Coyle's suggestion. I think perhaps we could ask the consultant if that might be a friendly suggestion for Ms. Kaline to go work with staff, work with the current owner and identify potentially aspects of the landscape, maybe even, and this is coming from a lawyer, so don't let me design it, but maybe even a discussion at DAS with Mr. McCullough and some of the other more design focused people, if that's something that we can do procedurally. So just trying to think through how we might be able to make progress on it. Suzanne, you look like you have something to say.
I do. We try not to take things to DAS prior to designation that you know, could impact the designation. However, staff does recommend that we work with the consultant, or, you know, the board directs us to work with the consultant on at least a map, so that we know what specific features are being designated.
Okay, thank you for that correction and guidance. Mr. McCullough.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a really dumb question. And that is there a master landscape architect category? I had no idea, and I'm a landscape architect. I know there's a master's in landscape architecture, but I've never heard of a master landscape architect, which there is. That's super cool. I love it.
Yes, there are master landscape architects.
Holy smokes.
Established.
Wow. Okay.
New career goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think, I mean, I don't know if there is ever been a designation in San Diego for one. And I think if anybody would deserve it, it would be Joe or his wife, for that matter. I don't really care. I don't really know enough about what they've done. I mean, I know their body of work in a at a smaller level, but I think that would be great. So I would love to see that, if that's something that we could do, maybe. And if we were to defer this, that the applicant might want to explore maybe a little bit.
If I can
Or if we're going to
interject,
continue, whatever we're going to do. Anyways.
right? I don't know if is this an okay time for me to talk briefly?
Kelsey, we cannot, or sorry, Ms. Kaline, we cannot hear you, but we will turn to you in a second. Let's try now.
Can you hear me? No, I'm guessing that's a no. Hey, Suzanne, can you hear me? Okay, great. So this nomination, we've worked with staff for since January to bring this forward. So we have gone through a couple iterations. And at one point we did bring this forth under A and also under D for it being a master. And we kind of came to the conclusion that it's really hard to untangle Joseph from Harriet, and the scholarly work that would need to go into that is essentially a thesis. So unfortunately, we as consultants don't have the time to do that. We would love if the board is willing, they can go ahead and designate Joe as a master landscape architect. We obviously all know that he deserves that. But from a procedural perspective, we really, like I said, it's a mountain of work that needs to be done, and it deserves more than a page or two in an HRRR. In terms of designating specific landscape elements, we are happy to work with staff to create a map of original elements. I do just want to acknowledge, though, that landscapes are evolving. So as I know you all know, so we can designate the black pine and other things, but that does not mean that it won't evolve over time.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Chang?
Just for your information, Joe Yamada did the design of the Chinese garden in the downtown Chinese Historical Museum with water features, treescape, and rock formations and arrangements. He also contributed to the Japanese garden in our Balboa Park. The 3 scenery garden was also part and parcel of his work, many other works, but he was known for studying the different rock shapes, studying the water flow, and of course, studying all the different trees, including the black pine, etc. So as you walk down the Japanese garden, you will find these very specific trees that came actually from Japan with very strong cultural elements to it. And if you walk downtown to the corner of 3rd and J, you can take a peek at the other design that he did for the Chinese Historical Museum. I just want to add a few things for you, for your reference.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Woods?
I'm going to throw some more dust into the whole mess. Okay. The consultant mentioned Criterion A, and I think that we should consider this under Criterion A. It's in the consultant's what? Oh.
Just speak louder.
Just speak louder. Okay. I think this should be considered under Criterion A as well. The consultant's report on page 12, there's an argument here about how the Yamadas were able to purchase this lot before the Fair Housing Act of 1968. They built the house. They didn't even know if they could move into it. And there actually is a precedent for this. And it is historic HRB number 1012, which was designated in 2011. This is a house in North Park. It was designated only under Criterion A as a special element of the city's cultural, social, and political development, as one of the few houses known to have made an exception to the standard restrictive covenants that prohibited ownership by anyone other than an individual of the Caucasian race. And that is it. So that's on the books. So, well, I just wanted people to think about it. And yeah.
Also, Mr. Chair, we had that project come before us over by Morena, which was the farm. And there's supposed to be a plaque for that. Wasn't that a Japanese family who then the the parents were sent to an internment camp, and the children who were American citizens, if I'm getting that correctly, were able to hold on to the house. Unfortunately, we lost that house as part of the development process, but that site, as I remember, was to be recorded and maybe a site plaque put on that. So that's also part of that same history and story under Criterion A. And I know that, you know, or I guess that the consultants, you know, want to do what they want to do for this property, but this is a significant family and significant themes, and they belong to the community too. These individuals belong to the community in San Diego. So I don't know how to sort this out, but I think it also ties in with that other property that we've dealt with in the last couple of years.
Thank you. Any further board member comment, thoughts? Mr. Winter.
I could just add that, you know, as an architect, I've come across when we're in Yamato Works professionally half a dozen times in the last 10, 15, 20 years. It is real significant. They had a real significant impact in San Diego. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. On the architecture side of things, I see them come up a lot. But from an expertise standpoint, I have no idea how to call out plans or things like that. I would definitely need feedback for that piece of it.
Okay. Seems like we're heading in the direction of consensus to, I mean, definitely support from the board of the Yamadas and of this resource, but trying to get it into the form of a motion that makes sense. So, Mr. McCullough.
Well, I think what we're talking about maybe is sending this back. Is that right? Or is somebody, because the other thing that I think the applicant just stated was that they've spent a lot of time on this. And are we penalizing an applicant for doing the right thing, right? So by sending it back, then their consultant is gonna have to do a bunch more work, and it's gonna cost a lot more money. And I'm just wondering, is that really the right? I mean, I agree, it needs to be done right, but I'm just a little concerned about that. Just we'll put that out.
In the interest of moving this along, I'm going to make a motion, and if other people want to make subsequent motions, that's fine too. So I'd like to make a motion to send back item number 02, the Joseph and Elizabeth Yamada House, for additional review and consideration of the significance of the landscape elements, the hardscape, the trees, the plants, and the style, and for staff to work with the consultant to develop a map of the significant features.
So we have a motion from Ms. Coyle. We have a second from Mr. Taylor.
And I just want to speak briefly to the motion, which is that landscapes can be ephemeral, but I believe based on the paragraphs that are in this report already and what appear to be readily available oral histories from people in San Diego, that we could come up with something, and those features need to be recorded somewhere in the history. Even if a plant dies at some point, then at least that history is recorded and in the record and informs the site and how owners move in the future. So that's my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. Any other comment from the board on the motion? Mr. McCullough?
Yeah, I have no idea how to do this, and it sounds to me like the applicant's not interested in the master landscape architect idea, but I love it. So I'm just kind of wondering, maybe I need to educate myself on how, when they bring this back, how that might occur. So maybe I can reach out to staff to get more information on that. And I'd just be curious if anybody else would be interested in supporting something like that.
As a
Commissioner Brady, serves for second. Oscar Galvin, Ruling, serves for second.
As a point of order, I'd like us to try and stick to my motion for right now, and then if you would like to make some subsequent motion or direction, that's fine.
It's not a motion, it's just comment before when they come back, that's all.
Right, and we're discussing the motion.
Okay. Can I ask Ms. Coyle if we can include in your motion a continuance to a date certain, pick a meeting that so that we do not have to go through noticing again?
If staff would prefer that, I would ask Kelsey Kaling to and the staff to figure out how much time that might take.
Alvin?
Yes, I think with the if the applicant can agree, I think if the applicant can agree with this proposition, the proposal, we do 2 months continuance to the November HRB meeting.
That's fine with me if Ms. Kaling agrees that that's an adequate amount of time.
That is an adequate amount of
We
time.
can't hear her right now. Kelsey, try again.
Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah, that should be enough time to work with Alvin. As long as there's a date certain, we're amenable to that.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Coyle, is that okay with you as far as your motion?
I amend my motion to include 60 days.
Very good. Mr. Taylor, is that okay with you as a seconder?
Yes.
Very good. All right, is staff clear on the motion that's before us?
Yes.
All right. Then any further board member comment before we call for a vote? Hearing none. Board Member Coyle,
Aye.
Dr. Chang,
Aye.
Board Member Farley, Board Member Taylor,
Aye.
Board Member Winter.
Aye.
Dr. Woods. Board Member McCullough.
Yes.
And that's a yes from me. So the motion carries unanimously. Appreciate everybody's hard work on this, and we look forward to seeing you guys back in November. As a point of order, I have to do a mea culpa as a chair. I neglected to give an opportunity for designated resources 1 and 4 on consent. So I know that we may have lost some folks, but if there's anybody still around who wants to be heard, or if the consultants are here and would like to invite those folks back, we do want to give them the opportunity to address the board. So I apologize for that. Mr. May, I don't know if your client is here. Did you have number 1? You have number 3, sorry. Kylie's coming up.
Unmute yourself on there.
The Zoom screen.
Hear me? Okay. There you go.
Chairman, members of the board, I just wanted to thank the board for my client. She had to leave. She's a university professor, but she was very proud to have the Arklow Cottage in La Jolla designated today. So I appreciate all your time and review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walls. And again, I apologize for doing that out of order. Folks tend to log off once their matters are concluded on consent. So, all right, I'm going to suggest that we take a 5-minute break before we go on with our next items. So 2:10 right now, we're going to come back at 2:15 and we will be on with item 3.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if we'll get.
All right, we're gonna go back, I say on the record. But the meeting is resuming. We're gonna take a roll call just to make sure that we acknowledge that everyone has returned. So we'll start with Board Member Coyle.
Here.
Dr. Cheng,
Here.
Board Member Farley.
Here.
Board Member Taylor,
Here.
Board Member Winter,
Here.
Board Member Woods,
Here.
Board Member McCullough,
Here.
and I am present as well. So thanks everybody for coming back. We are going to kick off with item number 3. This is El Cantoral Court. And this is the property located at 2454-2474 Adams Avenue. And I'm going to toss it to Mr. Lin for a staff report.
Thank you. Again. Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is item 3, El Cantoral Court. And my name is Alvin. So this item is being brought before the HRB in conjunction with the owner's desire to have the site designated as a historical resource. A historical resource research report was prepared, which concluded that the resource is significant under HRB Criterion A, C, and D, and staff concurs. Here's some property information. It's located in North Park in Council District 3. The subject resource is a bungalow court with integrated garages located along a former streetcar route. And the site consists of 5 standalone buildings constructed in the Pueblo Revival style. The exterior of the residential units are clad in uneven stucco and features Esplanada mission arches with flat roofs. The center courtyard is surrounded by concrete walkways and includes mature fruit trees and a gravel-filled pool, among others. Each of the buildings featured wood lintels, stucco door surround, rectangular casement, double hung or louver windows, and it also features an original 12-light parabolic arch windows present on each of these buildings. Modifications to this property include, from its 1928 date of construction, various window, garage door, and clay tile attic vent alterations. And in 1954, there was a permit to construct an attached laundry room on the east side of the 2-story building in the back. In 2019, Historical Resources staff approved a permit to modify windows on the 2nd-story building, the 2-story building. Under Criterion A, the subject property and its association with early 20th century development as a novel multi-family building type with a transit-oriented design exemplifies the historical, social, economic, aesthetic, and architectural development within the city and North Park community. Therefore, staff recommends designation under HRB Criterion A. Criterion B, staff is not recommending designation. For Criterion C, the resource continues to convey the historical significance of the Pueblo Revival style by embodying the historical characteristics associated with that style. Therefore, staff recommends designation under Criterion C. Criterion D, the resource is representative as a notable work of the proposed master builder Glenn Funchen, who was responsible for the design of many quality residential buildings and residential courts in the city. Specifically, the resource is one of his works built in the relatively rare Pueblo Revival style that expresses a quality of design seen in his other works, such as those in the Sunset Cliffs neighborhood. Therefore, staff recommends the establishment of Glenn Funchen as a master builder and the designation of the subject property under HRB Criterion D. And that concludes staff report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Before we move on to public comment, I did want to give Dr. Woods an opportunity to express or raise the issues that were on her mind when she pulled this item from consent. And I know Mr. May has a presentation, but would like to give Dr. Woods the opportunity so that to the extent we need presentation or response from the applicant consultant, that we can do that in a targeted way. Dr. Woods?
First of all, I wanted to thank Legacy 106. I mean, it's a wonderful report. It's so complete. The justification of function as a master builder and everything. I mean, it's wonderful. I have a policy question about the nomination, and it has to do with Criterion A, and whether it seems to me that it's implied here that all bungalow courts will now be considered resources under Criterion A. I mean, the resolution just says it's a new transit-oriented multifamily property type that emerged in San Diego. I mean, that's so broad, it almost seems to me that apartment houses would be included as multifamily. And so I just wanted some clarification, and I don't know what I think, but I'd like to know.
I'm going to let Mr. Lin answer it, and then I'm probably going to piggyback off of him.
Thank you. So to answer your question, a property could be significant under HRB Criterion A under the bungalow context statement if it represents or reflects the city's multifamily development to address the population boom resulting in housing shortages in the early 20th century, or if it can exemplify neighborhood growth as a streetcar suburb, which I think some are designated as community planning and development, such as zoning or land use changes or economic stimulus or redevelopment efforts. So that's what's written in the bungalow context statement. There are a few other considerations given to bungalow courts, such as per the context statement, earlier bungalow courts have priority compared to later ones. Certain types of form and features, such as landscape features, being critical to a bungalow court's design. Apartment courts are a separate thing not covered under bungalow court statement, and is not part of this designation. Being, of course, along or nearby a streetcar route is also a consideration given to bungalow analysis of bungalow courts. And integrity, there's a whole set of integrity considerations as well, but those are some of the big ones that I looked at, that we look for. Yes.
Dr. Woods, does that answer your question? I'm gonna open up for public comment because I think we've now understand where things are. Mr. May, I don't know that if your presentation or any aspects of your presentation touch on the aspect of Criterion A. I think that'd probably be the pertinent part to the extent that. Pardon?
I would like. I did address that.
There you go.
I realize you still have public comment first here. I just said I'd like to give my whole presentation and the reasoning why I thought it qualified under Criterion A.
Okay. How much time do you think you need?
15 minutes.
Okay. Do you think you could do it in 10?
I'll do the best I can.
All right.
So Carol, you're going to do the slides? Okay. Yeah. So just come on up and
You want you to do comment? Okay.
No, we'll have comment from others after you. And I will note just for the record that Mr. May has submitted a speaker slip, and then we also have a speaker slip in favor from Pamela
Malahan,
who is ceding time to Mr. May. So we'll give you a little bit of a break on the time, Mr. May, but if we can try and keep it to 10 minutes, that'd be great.
And if you want to just call out next slide, Caroline.
I will do that. Thank you. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. Most of you a lot of you don't know me very well. This is my first time speaking in 2 years, I believe. So thank you very much. This is the subject property. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Yes, and just to give you an idea of where it is, this is an aerial photograph showing the only aerial photograph that we had shows the back of the building, and then the photo on the right, my left, but whatever. My left is the back of the building from the neighboring property, that's not actually visible from the public view. Next slide. Just to divert to Criterion A, that was a trolley corridor. This is a half-mile away from the trolley headquarters, where they did all the trolley repairs and everything. And that all of these, a primary issue about bungalow courts is they're located where a single person only needing a one-bedroom tiny little apartment could hop out, get on the trolley, and get downtown in less than 15 minutes. So that's really important in understanding the whole citywide plan of building bungalow courts. The back unit is a two-story structure. The red arrow shows where there was a balconette or a metal balcony that's fallen off because it deteriorated, and I'm sure staff is concerned about seeing that restored someday. And then the windows in this slide are the reproductions that were done in the staff permit. Next slide. This is the parabolic window. I went into great length to try and understand where he got the idea for the parabolic windows. He actually did one in a house in Point Loma first, and then he expanded on it here. My theory is because the rooms have little corner fireplaces called beehive fireplaces, that the opening of the fireplace is parabolic. And those were Native American ovens in the Southwest, where the Pueblo Revival style began. I believe that was his inspiration. Next slide. This is a typical bungalow within the court. There's 5 buildings there, 4 of these little buildings, and you can see the bungalow, the parabolic arch. Above the door and the windows are these wooden lintels. They were structurally there because of the weight of a massive adobe building. If you didn't have a lintel, the walls would collapse. And then he specialized in rusticating the doors and the lintels and other features to make it look really ancient. Yeah, that's right. Go on to the next one. And this whole front here is very much like a Pueblo Indian and Native American house from New Mexico. And you can see the tapered chimney. That arrow points to where there had been a metal grill that again rusted away and dropped off. Next slide. This is the rusticated doors. And by the way, and you probably saw in my report, I went over to New Mexico and actually photographed buildings there to study the style and get a better feel for it. Next slide. And they're really hard to see in the courtyard because of all this overgrown landscaping. But that's part of the intent, was to create the shade for the people in the community. And just want to insert a little point here that Irving Gill, the master architect who is very famous in San Diego, he dreamed up the idea of having a central courtyard with little buildings around it. It was used primarily in the Marston Hills area, but it seems to have inspired the bungalow courts to have these little communal landscaping centers. Thank you. Next slide. And this is the permit that we've already discussed, where the city reviewed and restored, guided the restoration of a lot of the building. Next slide. And I talked already about the bungalow court context and the electric line. That all addresses the whole idea is that you put the little bitty homes, the little communities close to the electric line so that you could get downtown. And next slide. And I think it's an excellent example of Pueblo Revival. One thing I want to say is that there were more in San Diego at one point in time. Almost in every case, the owners of the houses didn't understand them and turned them into Spanish style. They put tile roofs on them, they put canopies with tile, and they changed the nature of the Pueblo Revival building. At the foot of 6th Avenue and Laurel and 6th Avenue, there was a large complex. It was demolished years ago. And that is a problem that as time goes along, people didn't identify or understand the buildings, so they tore them down. I've only, in the 22 years I've been doing this, I've only seen 2 Pueblo Revival buildings, and this is the second one. Next slide. And these are all the things you would expect from a Pueblo Revival building. We've already discussed that in detail. Next slide. And Glenn Funchen Function or Function developed a master and artistic body of architectural style. The main body of his work was 1925 to 1933, and I believe he merits the designation of master builder. In my research on him, and I pointed out in this report, I tracked down other buildings that he did, spent quite a good deal of time finding these buildings out there in the city. There's several that I recommended that should be considered in the future. One on Hamilton Street in particular called Aztec Court. He built that one first and then he built this one. And so there is this building plugs into his full body of work. Next slide. And these are the ones that he built when he was just trying to learn how to do building. Next slide. The key is that he actually used architectural plans provided by Eugene Hoffman. They were set up for a house over in Point Loma. He studied those plans, and then you see an explosion of creativity that occurred from his work. And those are the buildings that are already designated that were the early ones he did for the Pantages Mills and Shreve Company. Next slide. And then he began as a private builder, first building houses on the Point Loma property, and then he had clients out into the community. Almost immediately came up with Aztec Court and then El Cantoral. Some of these buildings are gone now. They've been demolished. I drove around, couldn't find them. Problem with San Diego is in 1938, most of the addresses were changed. And so they re-addressed, and then it's hard to find anything now. And there's 5 houses out there where the newspapers talked about things he built, but we have yet to find them. So, and there could be more, who knows? Next slide. And then, 19 years after his master period, he did some construction design. It wasn't very significant. And the Function building, they actually tore off his streamlined modern to restore an earlier Spanish style building. And then there is a custom house in La Mesa that he built in the ranch style, but that was at the end of his life. So I believe that is my last slide. No. But anyway, I think you've gotten the point here, and I don't need to say any more. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. May, and excellent job on time. You were half of what you predicted, so you did a great job. We have Scott Moomjian, who has his hand raised, has patiently been waiting with his hand raised virtually, and I don't know if Scott's still there, but Scott, if you would like to be heard, now's the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Maybe he took, Scott, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Can't hear you. Hold on. Just 1 second, Scott.
Okay.
There he is.
I can't, can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I was not going to comment on this item. And in terms of disclosure, I haven't had an opportunity to read through Mr. May's report on it, but I will take Dr. Woods's comment that it's very, very thorough. And from that, I'd like to, at least extend gratitude to Dr. Woods for at least calling out the issue of the bungalow court in terms of under Criterion A, that in this case, it might very well be too expansive to include this, and it might have the effect to include other properties when the underlying draft context statement hasn't been formally vetted, in my opinion. As the board is aware, myself and other consultants have expressed concern with the use of this draft statement. The board had directed staff to have this item discussed at the policy subcommittee. We're still waiting. We understand that from today's meeting, it will be considered in October. And I think that part of the dialogue, at least that I wanted to extend to the policy subcommittee, was how do we use this document? How do we interpret it? How do we make sure that it really reflects in significant properties and not properties with an overreaching effect? So I would submit to the board that this property does not need to be designated today under Criterion A. from Mr. May's, I think, very, very good PowerPoint presentation. There's probably more than enough evidence to indicate that this qualifies certainly under Criterion C due to its high level of integrity and character defining features, and perhaps even under D. So I would suggest to the board that if the board is going to make any motion, it should be considered for the property's architecture and not any potential role in community development, because again, we haven't had an opportunity to fully vet this draft bungalow court context statement before it's to become final and used by consultants and the board in evaluating these types of resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Musin. I will just note for the record that we did receive an online comment. I mentioned it earlier during the consent agenda, but this is from Kristen Harms on behalf of the University Heights Historical Society, that they support staff recommendation to designate this resource with a period of significance of 1928 under HRB criteria A, C, and D. So it's in the record. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to be heard on this item before we move on to board member comment? We do have one.
Bruce Coons.
Bruce, are you there?
I am.
Bruce, give us a second. We're going to get the volume right. Bruce, go ahead.
Hi, we submitted a letter, but as long as it was on consent, but we wanted to make sure that you knew that we fully support all three criteria designating it today. And we believe that the bungalow context statement being adopted by the state of California is perfectly usable today and should be included. This is a fantastic bungalow court, and the example, it's probably a prime example of what the bungalow context statement is referring to, and is exemplary in style. I don't know what all the angst is around the bungalow context statement, but it is in fact and adopted by the state and is fully usable and for designation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? All right, then we will close public comment. And I will invite my fellow board members. Maybe I'll invite Dr. Woods to kick us off if she has any follow-up on items she's raised earlier.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Based on kind of the competing public testimony we just got, one person saying that the context statement is just a draft, and then another one saying that the context statement has gone through the State Historic Preservation Office. I'm just going to ask staff, which is true or correct?
The city got a grant from the state to complete the bungalow court and apartment court context statement. It's both, just to clarify. And we completed it. It was submitted by the planning department to the State Office of Historic Preservation, and they approved it. So it's been approved by the state and for use by staff and the board as a context statement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Mr. McCullough?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that I absolutely love this development. And as a matter of fact, I would say this in conjunction with the one next door to it are probably two of my favorite apartment complexes in San Diego, or at least in our neighborhood. I kind of live up in that neighborhood. So I love it, and I'm very much in support of this going forward, and under any sort of designation I would support. But one thing I did want to say, just for the record, is I personally have a big problem. I know this seems petty, but the bars on the steps have to go. I think in the report, it talks about them being insignificant to the historic significance of the structure. And it probably is in the grand scheme of things, but if you look at the apartment next door, there's no bars. I can see where at one point bars might have been necessary in the neighborhood, but they're no longer. I live in the neighborhood and I have a front patio, and I don't have homeless people sleeping on my patio yet. So I really think the bars on the garage and those steps have to go. And I know there's nothing that we can't necessarily put that in our motion, but I just want to state that for the record for the owner if he's on the call.
Yes, Mr. McCullough, we cannot condition designation or any future Mills Act conditions. Thank you.
I know. I had to say it. Anyways, I'm in support.
All right, other comments, report. Mr. Winter?
Yeah, I'm fully in support. I just assumed this one was designated already. I mean, I thought it was years ago. Yeah, it's awesome. It just needs to be designated. And with all the criteria, if the state context is approved, whether we disagree with it or not, it applies. So whether we disagree with how broad it is or not broad. So
Yeah, I think this is like the 6th board meeting where the context statement has come up in 11 since it was first discussed in a meeting, I think last August, but we do have it on the agenda for a policy committee meeting. I think our next policy committee meeting, we're going to discuss it as in October. Is that correct?
I believe the plan is to have a 2-part discussion.
Okay.
And then October's meeting, we will begin the discussion. We're really waiting on the planning department to put something together, and so that we can both planning and DST be present at the policy meeting and give feedback.
Very good. So I do think, as I understand it, the question was relating to the process of that statement coming before the board last year and then being sent on to the state with an indication that the board would have further discussion about it. And my understanding is that Ms. Stanko is preparing a memorandum about the process and about the preparation of it and what's going on. I think we've discussed other items in the past that have gone in conjunction with the state process, and sometimes our timelines on the state designations are pretty short, and our ability to have input is pretty limited. So that's at least something that I would draw from my experience, and something that we'd love to fix. But local governments complaining about the state is a pretty common thing sometimes. So we do what we can. Do we have any further discussion or motions on this item? Anyone willing to make a motion? We have comment from staff, Mr. Lynn.
I just want to say, make a request real quick. In my staff report, a draft resolution, if the board members choose to move forward with it, this contains, I think I characterize it as an asymmetrical plan. It is in fact symmetrical. So if you were to move forward with it, just if you can correct that for me, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
So can I just clarify also about Criterion A and the bungalow courts? When Alvin was investigating this property and looking and analyzing the property in Criterion A, we actually ended up finding that we were still analyzing the property similarly to what we were doing prior to the bungalow court context. So the recommendation that staff is putting forward is very similar to bungalow courts that we've seen at the board within the last couple of years. So it's not much different at this point. So that's just a little background information.
In the interest of moving this forward, this item, I would like to move the staff's recommendation with the correction of asymmetrical to symmetrical.
second.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. So we have a motion and a second from Board Member Winter. Any further board comment? All right, hearing none, we will move on to a vote. Board Member Coyle.
Aye.
Dr. Chang,
Aye.
Board Member Farley.
Aye.
Board Member Taylor,
Aye.
Board Member Winter.
Aye.
Dr. Woods,
Aye.
Board Member McCullough,
Yes.
and that's a yes for me. Motion carries 8-0. Would Mr. May or the property owner like to be heard? Mr. Crosby, I see your hand virtually. Give us just a second and then we'll open up the mic for you. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Cool. I just want to thank the board for considering my property. I think it's a very special and unique property in San Diego. I've long admired it before I bought it back in 2006. And per Mr. McCullough's comments, it is a work in progress. It is getting better a little bit every year, but I think the Mills Act is doing its job in this case, or it will, because it is expensive to bring these properties back to where they should be. And with Mr. May's help and his amazing reports, recommendations, and things that it called out, it will get more in line with Mr. Function's vision over time. And I just want to express my gratitude to the board and Legacy 106 for their hard work on this project, and I truly appreciate the designation.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Crosby. It is a great property, and I know, 16 years of ownership, the quality of the property certainly reflects your interest in preservation and your willingness to bring it forward. So we appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. May, as well. Okay, let's move on then to the last item of the day. We are on to item 6. Okay, we are going to release Mr. McCullough before we get to item 6. And so we will continue on. We do lose Ms. Farley at 3:30, right? So let's try and get through this item. We got 38 minutes. I believe we have a staff report from Ms. Anthony and then an organized presentation from Mr. Mumjan. So everybody get queued up and we will get started.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Anthony, Senior Planner with the Historical Resources Department. Today we're bringing forward the property located at 3093 to 3095 El Cajon Boulevard is being brought before the Historical Resources Board in conjunction with the preliminary review application to determine whether or not the building is historically significant as part of the constraints analysis for future development. A historical research report was prepared, which concludes that the resource is not significant under any HRB criteria. Staff disagrees. It concludes that the site is significant and is a significant historical resource under HRB Criterion C. The property is located on the northeast corner of El Cajon Boulevard and Illinois Street in the North Park community. The subject resource is a one-story commercial building constructed in 1937 in the streamlined modern style. It features a smooth stucco exterior, flat roof with a curved parapet, horizontal overhang with inset with spine lines, multi-pane wood storefront windows, and an asymmetrical facade. The building horizontal overhang and windows curve at the northeast corner of El Cajon Boulevard and Illinois Street. A horizontal inset speed line runs along the top of the building just below the curved roof line along the north and east facades. In 2020, boards were placed over the windows and doors. The original windows are still intact underneath, visible in the photo above. The primary facade faces north on El Cajon Boulevard and features 2 entry doors with multi-pane transom windows set between the storefront windows. A small window opening is located on the western end of the south facade, along with the outline of the non-extant 1922 bungalow, formerly addressed as 4250 Illinois Street, as the two properties had shared a common wall. In circa 2001, the property changed from 2 units to 1, and in 2020, historic staff approved the demolition of the 1922 bungalow and detached garage as consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. Other modifications completed at dates unknown include the removal of original door on the east facade, the addition of a non-original window on the east facade, the addition of roofline light fixtures, and removal of the neon signage. These modifications do not significantly impair integrity of design, materials, workmanship, or feeling. Staff is not recommending designation under HRB Criterion A or B. The building continues to convey the historic significance of the streamlined modern style and retains integrity from its 1937 period of significance. Therefore, staff recommends designation of the property under HRB Criterion C. Staff is not recommending designation under HRB Criterion D. This concludes staff report. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Mumjan, I see your speaker slip as well as 3 others. In the interest of time, do we think that you could do this in 10 to 12 minutes instead of the 15 that you'd identified?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I have a total of 44 slides, most of which, though, fortunately for us today, are photographs. So since this is an involuntary designation, and has really kind of held up our entire development, I would respectfully request the additional couple of minutes. And so if you could give me 15, I think, bang through it.
Okay, let's do what you can to move it along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen? Is that yes? Can everyone see the screen? Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Scott Mumjan. I'm representing North Park Business Associates, LLC. We disagree with the staff recommendation and the recommendation specifically to designate the property. We disagree with the recommendation on the basis that this is a small 777 square foot addition. It's a mere marginal example of the art moderne, the streamlined modernistic style, and numerous changes have compromised its original integrity. We believe that a lack of character defining features and changes to the property have made it ineligible for designation under Criterion C, in addition to other criterion. I'd like to start with some background to the item because I think that the board really needs to understand this. This property was referred today to the HRB as part of a single discipline preliminary review that we submitted in August of this year. But it's important that the board understands that an earlier SDPR application was submitted in May of 2019 that included 3 parcels and 6 buildings, which include the property. And at the time, the property was shown to be an addition, which was built in 1937, to a much older craftsman residence built in 1922. And that residence was identified, as was the addition, as 4250 Illinois Street. So what was curious about that is that aside from the property, staff cleared all of the other buildings, including the 4250 Illinois residence, as ineligible for designation. And consequently, the determination by the city therefore allowed for the demolition of the residence in 2020. And what it did is it resulted in the loss of the original context and relationship between the 1922 home and the 1937 addition. So today, this is kind of a one-off. The property really needs to be acknowledged as an addition rather than as an originally conceived and built standalone commercial building. Just really quickly going through some photos. Here's the 2019 historic review. To the left, we have the property, and the other 2 properties to the west were cleared by staff. More specifically, here's the property and another adjacent property. And you can note the very similar appearance to the property. Today, these 2 buildings were very similar. Staff really essentially allowed the demo of the building to the right, but is bringing forward to the board the property to the left. And of course, they do look architecturally significant. Here's a much broader picture. Staff didn't show you the whole picture when they were going through their photos, but here we have it. Here's the Illinois Street residence to the left in the addition, which is the property today in March 2019. Here's another photograph of the two buildings together from the same year, 2019. To the left, we have the Illinois Street residence and then the property adjacent to it. And here's exactly where this fit in. You can see the rafter tail that was attached here, and you can see the outline of the building. So again, my point is, when this was allowed to be removed, the structure on the left, it really caused a loss of context and understanding between the relationship of the two buildings. Turning our attention to Criterion C, I'd like to briefly discuss the streamlined modern style. This was a popular style that was in favor from about 1920 to 1940. The whole style is to convey an intense fascination with speed, whether that in transportation or communication. And a lot of the visual vocabulary was derived from high-speed modern transportation machines, right? The airplane, the automobile, and the ocean liner. And this also was a kind of an exciting style because it helped pull America out of the gloom of the Great Depression. So consequently, buildings in this style include homes and service stations, motels, drive-in restaurants, theaters, and supermarkets. It was also used in remodeling efforts. According to noted architectural historian David Gephardt, there's certain features of the style which are similar to the ones you have in the modernism context statement, including horizontal rectangular shapes, dramatic rounded corners, curved walls, semicircular bays, narrow horizontal bands of windows, glass block, and small rounded windows are very important. Also, an emphasis on metal doors, metal windows, metal frames, steel panels, stainless steel, and aluminum. Also, contrasting this are smooth wall surfaces, usually of stucco with a flat roof, a small ledge or coping at the roof line, and asymmetrical facades with horizontal grooves in the lines of the walls. And just looking at residential examples throughout the United States, here we have some residential examples from in the state of California. Here's some Denver and Los Angeles. Again, the dramatic corners, the use of glass and the facades. Here's some department store examples, some broadcasting examples from Los Angeles and New Jersey. Here's a manufacturing plant in Los Angeles for the Coca-Cola bottle company. And of course, supermarkets and grocery stores. Here we have some in Ralph's in Los Angeles. Turning our attention to other supermarkets in LA, we have Thrifty and we have Sontag. Here are some properties the board should be aware of that were designated by the HRB because of their art moderne style. The Gustafson Furniture Building, again, the rounded corners, the block glass, the overhangs, right, the stucco, the parapets, all of these details. Here's the one in 1926. It's the Decca project. This was subject to a subsequent development, but they were forced to incorporate a lot of these or wanted to incorporate a lot of these streamlined modern features. Here's the Woolworth building on University Avenue, a commercial example. And here's one that the board should recognize. This is the Dr. Roy and Herma Ledford Charles Salyers building. It was designated by the board and it was rescinded by council this year based upon new information. And this building, in many ways, I think, although altered, was certainly in contrast to the property today, perhaps a better representative example, although, of course, this building did have problems with it. Here are some properties for the board's consideration that were not designated. One on Market Street, which is it was not designated by the board in 2006. Here's some residential examples that were not designated in 2007. Here's the Pacific Highway, the Tops building, a terrific example of the style not designated by the board in 2011. Here's the City Printing Building, not designated by the board in 2014. And here's a little one on 4th Avenue, not designated by the board in 2015. And I put a long paragraph on the right. You don't have to read it, but basically what it says is, hey, there's a lot of characteristical styles of this, many of which are on the property today. And the board nevertheless chose to not designate this property in 2015. Here we have the building today. Obviously, it's in very, very poor condition, subject to a public nuisance and vagrants that break in all the time, hence the reason it was boarded and the site secured. But as you can see, and of course, there's building scarring from the former Illinois Street residence that was tacked onto the south elevation. But The point being is that this building was subject to an HRRR by Brian Smith and Associates. And the report is very detailed. It indicates the property is not eligible for designation under any criteria. And specifically, this is because the property lacks many of the character defining features of the streamlined modern style, as well as original integrity. So again, it possesses only limited features of the style. For example, there's no flat roof with a coping or flat parapet. Rather, it has a curved parapet. There are no steel sash windows. Steel windows are very characteristic of the style. These are wood windows. There's no glass block. There's no rounded porthole windows. Really, I guess technically it could be an asymmetrical facade, but it also, that's kind of a far statement because really that does have more symmetry, I think, than anything else. And it really does have an underwhelming horizontal massing and emphasis as it stands alone. Here's a photograph of the building in 1937. You have lights that were added and then removed. You have a window added at the southeast elevation and a door here that was infilled. And then what was really neat about this building at one time, it had some great neon signage there for the real estate office, but that has been removed over the years. So when you look at the modifications and alterations chart on the left and the integrity elements, I think this is a pretty clear case where the building doesn't meet the integrity threshold. For example, as I said, the sign is gone, the 1922 residence is gone, compromising the entire south facade. We have the installation of the window along the southeast elevation, the removal and infill of the door opening. And considering the small size of this property, almost 800 square feet, these cumulative changes on this small building have been enormous. The report does indicate that the location element for integrity is present. However, design is no longer there. The setting to in and around the property has been changed with infill development. As you know, the whole site around it's been cleared. Those other buildings that were cleared in 2019 are no longer there. The building does not have its materials or workmanship elements. It doesn't have its feeling. These modifications to the property and the loss of the surrounding buildings have contributed to this, and there is no historic association. So the point I want to leave with is that the fact that the property is a marginal, nondescript, and unremarkable commercial addition designed in a streamlined modern style, formerly attached to a house which no longer exists, coupled with the fact that the property has been modified and altered such that it lacks original integrity, translates to the fact that this property does not qualify under Criterion C. And also, in addition, no historical evidence was identified to support designation under any other criterion. I know that there was some discussion about whether this property is eligible under Criterion A as exemplifying or reflecting special elements of North Park's commercial development from about 1930 to 1945. But if you turn to Brian Smith's report on page 5, about halfway down the first paragraph, he really goes into detail as to why this building does not qualify under Criterion A. So there are no written findings in the record to support any determination that this property qualifies under Criterion A. Based upon all the historic documentation and evidence presented, it's clear to us, and hopefully the board will concur, that the property is not a representative example of the streamlined modern style, and all these modifications and alterations have compromised the original integrity. So on behalf of my client, I would ask the board not to designate the property under any HRB criterion. That is the end of my presentation, Mr. Chair. There are individuals on the development team who might be able to answer other questions relative to the property, should you like them to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mumjan. Just under 12 minutes, so I had more faith in you than you did, but appreciate it. Do we have other members of the public? I know we had other members or representatives from the applicant or the ownership group who had ceded their time to Mr. Mumjan, but if there are other third parties that would like to be heard as part of public comment, now is the time.
There's 2 people online.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're okay with our side. Of course, in case there's any questions.
If Scott is speaking, we cannot hear him.
Oh.
Scott, do you want to finish?
Well, I was just going to say again, if there are any questions for the board, for members of our development team, I think we stand pat with our time. Thank you.
All right. I cannot see the other members of the public, so I will defer to the folks They're not popping up on my screen.
Bruce Coons.
All right, Mr. Coons, you want to get ready while we set you up to speak?
I'm ready. Thank you, Chairman Hutter, members of the board, Bruce Coons, Executive Director of Save Our Heritage Organization. I forgot to introduce myself last time. Anyhow, thank you for allowing us to talk on this subject. We fully support staff's recommendation. Could staff put up the photograph from the cover photograph from the staff presentation for me? I'd appreciate it if we could see that. Unless I missed my guess, Scott was wrong. The windows, the last time I looked at it, appeared to be steel. They look like they are in the photograph. I don't know if staff can opine on that, but we feel this is a very good example of streamlined modern style that once was pretty prominent throughout San Diego, mainly related to our air and space industry, which we were first in the world for many different, first in flight, first landing on a ship, for the Spirit of St. Louis, and many other achievements. And so it spread throughout the city. But now there are very few examples left. This is a good example. It has the curved corner that Scott talked about. And the speed lines and along the awning and the parapet. It's I don't see the problems that Scott saw with it. We've had interest from the public. I have a number of emails about this building over time, but we think it's a good one. We think it qualifies. We disagree with the detractions that were brought up, and we want you to designate it today. We also, I know this isn't part of the designation, but it's a small footprint. It should be easy to incorporate into a new development. And that's what we'd like to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. Is there another speaker from the public?
Sure. Sharon Joe.
Sharon Gill. Sharon, go ahead.
Hello. I was hoping you'd see my hand. I would urge you to not designate this property because it would not be in the greater good of society. You are being asked to, you're not being allowed to consider the consequences of designation. You're being told this is for constraints analysis for future development, but you're not told anything about that development. We all assume that it's going to be a mixed-use building with housing, which is exactly what this community, the city's climate action plan says should be on this type of property in this location on this street. This is, and we know we have a housing shortage. We know we need more housing. So we should not be putting constraints on development when the developer is against it. You have to consider whether this is important enough to prevent housing, to prevent a good development project, to raise, whether you should be raising costs by designation. And if I have a little bit more time, I'll add that the majority of the public are not interested in historic designation. The properties you have now, you have some 3 million people in this county. You have, before the pandemic, some 35 million people would visit. And yet all of the historic properties, the government properties, lose money. People really aren't interested in this, but people are interested in climate change. And we want good projects.
Thank you, Ms. Gum.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to be heard? All right. We will move back to board member comment, and I'll open it up for the board. I will begin the conversation and just ask if staff can provide a little bit more detail about the clearance of the surrounding properties in 2019 or 2020. I did notice when I was reviewing the report that it looked like the Brian Smith Associates report was originally dated 2019, revised September 2020, March of 21, May of 24, or May of 22, August of 22. So I don't know if this report is a subset of what was previously reviewed. And I would hope that maybe Shannon, you can shine some light on that for us.
So from my understanding and going through the record, the property came in 2019 for over 45 review for the 3 parcels to do a combination building permit, electrical, plumbing, all the for a project. Buildings were subsequently cleared. A report was required. This building was started. That permit, I believe, expired over time. And then it was never issued. And then in 2020, the applicant came in to demolish the properties. That was 4250 Illinois Street. The other properties were cleared already on the other parcels, so I didn't look at those permit history. But on this parcel, that came in 2020. The demo permit was approved by historic staff because that property, the Illinois Street, the craftsman was cleared. It was determined not historic. Only the streamlined commercial building was determined potentially historic. And so they allowed them to demolish the attached building and the garage from the site in 2020. Staff approved that clearance. And then in 2022, and what I reviewed, because this was prior to me, was the prelim where they came back asking for the clearance of this building with new information.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's helpful background. I know in the past.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
To that question. So I heard Scott's, there's a single disciplinary review in August, like last month, and it came to the board this month. I mean, it just seems like a lightning speed.
Yes, I've been working with them to get it through pretty fast so they can get it to the board, because it has been in the it's been in process for a while with them and with prior staff. And so when it came in, the report has been through numerous revisions, so it's pretty much been complete.
You
So
have history with this kind of property, felt more comfortable with it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to tell you, Matt, you need to ask the right people, I guess. Okay, other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Coyle?
Thank you. I had a question for staff on this sort of novel, it's just an addition argument. I'm not sure that I've heard that while I've been on the board so far. So it seemed like it's a fully walled property in and of itself and just had a common wall. I'm just wondering if that argument was considered by staff.
Yes, the argument was considered. It's been it was the way buildings were constructed where they shared a common wall, and we went through the building record, the assessor's building record, they call it a common wall. So it just shared the wall. It was not an addition.
Thank you. I also wanted to just note that the comment from the member of the public is outside the purview of what I understand our charge is. It's about the historic value of this property, not any redevelopment or housing or climate change. While those are all important policy issues, those are not things that we are supposed to consider. Having said that, I also, it wasn't really brought up, but in the integrity issue, there's a difference between condition and integrity. And we've had boarded up properties before, And sometimes it takes a little creativity to kind of peel those off in your mind and realize what's there. But I think some of those alleged integrity issues may actually be more condition issues, which are not a big problem as we designate. So having made those comments, even though it's a modest structure, I think it's a valuable structure and I support the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. Other comments?
I have one question for staff.
Mr. Taylor.
Related to the windows, whether they're steel or wood, actually.
There would.
All right. I will say for myself, I am troubled by the demolition of the property next door. I don't think we have a lot of information about the original construction or the planned use, right? I could see very easily, especially in the 20s, the construction of a craftsman house with a commercial building right next door and sharing a wall or using those buildings in conjunction with one another, common ownership, that sort of thing. So I do think that in other circumstances where we have seen the demolition of surrounding structures, that is a problem with the setting in terms of the integrity. And you know, obviously this is a very now very prevalent sort of corner lot and corner of the lot structure that you can see the resulting scarring on the building and the impacts of the demolition of the surrounding building. So again, I think appreciate, Shannon, all the work that you've done to move this forward quickly and building on prior work. But I do think that creates a problem, I think, in terms of the way that the building is going to be analyzed and the way that the building is going to continue to live. So those are my thoughts. Yeah, I think that the demolition of the surrounding buildings and in particular the common wall building will create a problem for the way that this building will continue on, right? To the extent that it remains, to the extent we designate it, it's a different building now because its sister building has been destroyed. And that I think is part of what we have to consider when we consider the integrity. That's not a condition issue. That's the fact of how it was originally set, how it was originally designed and built.
Mr. Chair, can I address that last point?
Absolutely.
Okay, it kind of harkens back to one of our first items today on the Spindrift site when I mentioned the concern about the bifurcation of the structure and the archaeological tribal cultural site. You know, there's a bifurcation here as well. And, you know, I agree that maybe we need to be looking at these things together from a CEQA and other perspective versus serially taking away parts of it. I think it's kind of unfair to hold against this building what was allowed not by us, you know, in another setting, to hold it against the thing that's left now, when maybe we should have been looking at the whole of the property to start with, but that's not, I think, what the applicant wanted. And now to kind of hold that against the resource seems to me to be a little inconsistent and unfair. And it is a small building. And as I believe Mr. Coons mentioned, while we're not here to look at the redevelopment of it, it certainly, because it's small, could be more easily moved, and it could be incorporated if in fact there's a development that comes forward and would come before us, presumably with a site development permit. That's the order we do things in. Is this resource eligible? And then we look at it with a site development permit later. So I just wanted to share those thoughts of mine as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of our former board mates, Priscilla Berge, if she were here, she'd probably often like to talk about how if the ghost of the designer builder were to walk down the street and look at a resource, would they recognize it as what they lived in or knew? And I think in this instance, it's a situation where they wouldn't, right? They say, what happened to the other half? And I do think that I agree with you process wise. I don't really understand. And I think one of the things that we've talked about before, and I would just remind staff, it's always helpful to me at least to understand the greater context of what else has happened, right? If there's other clearances that have come before, I would love to see that, or at least have it noted in the report that, yes, there was a process of what the other documents were, whether we can be sent links to that within the PTS system or whatever, Cella and whatever system we're using now to track all that stuff, to the extent that we could have access to it, that would be helpful to me. Maybe not everybody, but to me that kind of context would be helpful. But I think evaluating this resource, there are certainly aspects of our role as board members sometimes where we do have to imagine that things were still there or changes hadn't been made. This is not one of those instances. We have to evaluate it as it sits today. So, Ms. Farley, I think you had something to say.
Oh, yeah, just really short because I got to leave. But when you just said about if the ghost could walk back through and be able to say they could recognize that property, I actually think his presentation actually helped me identify that property very well. And so even though it's what do they want to call it, an add on another building there, I can clearly look at that building and see that architect style. And so when you go to Criterion C and it says, or an identifiable method of construction or that type of a thing, I see that in there.
Okay, thank you. Other board member comments? I know, Ms. Farley, we have 5 minutes or so left with you. We don't want to stretch you too much, but I also know that as we lose board members, the dynamics change in terms of our votes and quorum and those sorts of things. So if we have a motion or further comment from Dr. Woods.
I was going to make a motion that we designate this resource pursuant to staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Is there a second?
I second.
Second.
Okay, second from Dr. Chang. Any further comment, questions?
I'd like to speak to the motion. Things get appealed. That's not our job. Then it goes out of our hands above to the policymakers. I don't think that we should be overly concerned about us doing our job. And if something gets appealed, then it's out of our hands. So I would just urge you to think about the staff recommendation and the comments of our board members. The chips will fall where they fall. I wish Ms. Berge were here so she could speak for herself. She was certainly a vocal board member, and I know I learned a lot from her when she was here. But she should be allowed to speak for herself. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? All right, we will call for a vote on the motion. We will start with board member Coyle.
Aye.
Dr. Chang.
Aye.
Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Mr. Winter.
Aye.
Dr. Woods.
Aye.
And it's a no for me. So the motion carries 6-1. Is that correct? All right. Mr. Mumjian or property owner, anyone like to be heard on the designated resource?
No, I think that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Then we will wrap up today. Our next board meeting is Thursday, October 27th, 2022. Location as planned for now is City Administration Building Committee Room, 202 C Street on the 12th floor. So hopefully we can make that work for next month. We will see you all then.